Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the hero's story. Now, the hero story was made, well, not made, but rediscovered by Joseph Campbell. He's a person who wrote a lot in the 1970s and 1980s. So we're going to visit what that is exactly. We're also going to talk about its use. I'm going to prove to you that it exists, the hero's story and what he is talking about, and show you different examples from politics and music, that kind of thing. Then we're going to talk about Christ specifically, because Christ and the hero myth, they overlap perfectly. And then lastly, we're going to talk about why it's important. So first, the hero's story. The hero's story is something that was basically conned by Joseph Campbell, from what I understand. And something that Joseph Campbell did was in like the 1970s, 1980s, actually it was his whole life's work. The guy died in 1987. What he did was he went through every single myth that ever existed, and he tried to pull the common story together, the common denominator. So everything from like Krishna in the Hindi area, Gautama Buddha, Christ, Zeus, Mithras, Tiamat, all those that you could possibly think of, the oldest possible stories, Native American stories, every single one of them. And he brought them all together, wrote about them, and he came to the conclusion that there's a formula that's involved. The formula is there's a call to adventure. You start in the world of the normal. There's a call to adventure. You cross the threshold, like there's a threshold this way, and you cross the threshold of the known into the unknown. And you descend, and you have adversity down here. That's almost like the descent to hell. And then you overcome it, a struggle happens. Then you come back to the normal with a boon for yourself and for mankind. And throughout that whole scenario, there's oftentimes a helper. There's oftentimes some sort of loss that you have to go through. So that's the hero story. And something I'm probably going to do on this channel, at least going forward, is I'm going to look for the hero story specifically in reference to Christ, because there's something special about the Christian story, which I'll get to, and see if we can find different elements of it in every single, video, entertainment, or song that we possibly can. So how can we prove that the hero story is actually just that? In every single movie that you watch, there's a problem. There's always a problem, and there's a hero. There's usually a hero. It's very rare that you see a movie about unless it's maybe some kind of nature documentary, it's not going to be like, look at this giant crowd that saved this other giant crowd. It's going to be about individuals, because it has to resonate with the individual. The line between good and evil goes right down the middle from the person, and from the individual, that's how you can cultivate culture. That's how you can make a lot of things happen. So one of the ways we see this is in music, for example. So oftentimes, what do you have? You have either comedy or tragedy in music. You have the song that, that talks about happiness. Well, it gives you a reason, it gives you something to aim at. That's if you're down here in the doldrums, or maybe you're right here, you need a little bit of push upward, you aim for that in the music. Stuff that brings you down lets you know that trial will come, or trial has come, and kind of gives you that rhyme. Politicians use this quite often, the hero story, but they use it a little bit differently. Instead of pointing to the individual, they point to the abstract. And point to the abstract because they want you to realize the fight is not worth it, the fight is impossible. Like, the world's gonna burn unless you listen to me. I am the hero. Or we're gonna go to war with this certain faction. Unless you trust me, I can get us through this. You have to set up some kind of giant abstract obstacle. But the thing is, they never posit a solution. Well, they might here and there, but it's not like a workable solution. It's something like, well, first off, how on earth will they know what the solution is? But it still resonates off the hero story that the solution's not really important that much. So that gives you a name to follow. And this is a thing that I'll bring up again. It's a David Hume saying, you can't get an ought from an is, which means you cannot figure out the way forward. You cannot figure out what to do specifically just because you know how things are. You have to have an aim that's above that, that's above where things are. You need to have your aim in myth. You need to have an aim that goes up somewhere, a certain direction you're trying to follow. And with that direction you're trying to follow, that will help you get to the end of the hero story, at least maybe get back to normal compared to that hell that you are in. So the next point I want to make is how the hero story is outlined in the Christian message. Now, there's a lot to this part specifically. One of the things that Joseph Campbell did when he's talking about the hero myth is he took every single thing, like he put them all on the same plane. He put Zeus on the same plane as Christ. Now, the argument that I would make is there's way more evidence for the Christian message that Christ said and did what he did and actually existed. This is actually one of the reasons that C.S. Lewis became a convert, because he viewed it through Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, as the true myth. And there's something about that, if it actually did happen. And so then you're mixing like your aim, your myth, the transcendence, with like the reality and it's like narrative and reality touch. It's like so cool to think about. So there's a lot to Christ and the heroes. There's like layers of hero stories in here. The first one being like when he's a youth, he's like 12 years old or something, and his parents leave him in the temple accidentally, and that's his normal. And he was studying scripture. Then later on, when he becomes a little older, he gets led by the Spirit into the wilderness, and he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights and undergoes temptation that all men will have. First off, the flesh. He is tempted by hunger, then he is tempted by power, then he is tempted to test his invulnerability. Now, the last two are kind of switched depending upon which gospel you're reading, but that's not the point. The point is he was tempted pretty hardcore, but when he came back, he started preaching a message. It's like that was the trial he went through to start his campaign, the authentic message that he had. And he had to undergo that trial. That's just one part of it. This is the disciples factor in the Bible, not necessarily Christ. They witness their hero being killed. They observe him alive again. So that's like, they make it through this point and they still have faith, and they actually have like a pull. This is the myth factor coming to reality. People don't come back from the dead. So when they see him, that's the myth factor, like, holy crap. And they start to preach with authority, even though those in power wanted to stop them and do away with them and kill them. And the thing about the disciples that's interesting if you read about them is they all died alone. So their hope was so far above the care of death that they were willing to just go do that for the benefit of mankind and for their own benefit, their treasures in heaven. And Paul later on in the gospel says, imitate me like I imitate Christ. So why is that important? Well, again, this is from David Hume. Every single thing you do is based on a story. We think in stories. Everybody thinks in stories. So everything we do, you want to aim at. It's something that you're aiming at that's mythic. It's like transcendent. It's abstract. You're aiming at a certain direction. Even if it's nihilism, nihilism is still an aim. So if something is as true as somebody coming back from the dead to motivate people to preach that because there is life, there's something that exists after death. Christ is also unique as far as I can tell because his story began before he was born and continues on. Like, it's finite in the person, but he was heralded before his birth. And then after he dies, he shows up again, according to the scriptures. And the spirit of him, of seeing people made in the image of God and dying for man's sins, that whole kind of concept, the mythic hero that's set up on a template, it is basically the undergirding of America. It's written into the Constitution because of what he verified that God was attempting to convey to us about how valuable we are, made in the image of God. So the importance arrives at what story you're telling yourself. So what story are you telling yourself? Are you telling yourself that, we're made in the image of God, that nothing really happens after? Maybe you're a bit apathetic. Who cares, right? Well, if truth is out there, if truth can be found, the next question is, well, how do you find it? And then what is it? Well, how do you find it is actually better than what is it, because the second you get an is, you can't get an ought from that. But how do you find it? How do you find truth? I think the way you find truth, as far as I can tell, because we are not omniscient, omnipresent, or immortal, is you use your best evidence. And of all the myths that have ever been given to us, I think the best evidence is in Christ himself. So we're going to be using this channel to go through a lot more myths, like maybe the Matrix, other things, and pull out the essentials from them, try to extract the deeper meanings that they convey that keep you interested, that are also in the Bible stories. So if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe below. It really helps me out a lot. And if you have any requests, pop them down there too. Maybe I'll go over a movie here or there, or a series or a book or something I'd love to read. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.